theory of inclusive justice and a book on being old. So I should say she is...
That's its name, on being old.
And she has been recognized by the American Philosophical Association in 2009, who honored her with the Quinn Prize for her contributions to philosophy. So, and the title of her paper is Moral Status, What a Bad Idea? Why Discard It? What Replaces It? Anita.
Thanks very much. Since you all have my paper, which was so long that I just broke it off at the end, I can tell I'm getting distracted because there's just a line which I actually think was what I was talking about. The very last line is about the deep conflict that I hope we can solve, or starts off. I'm just going to give you a synopsis and hit some of the high points and add some. The first, I really would like to thank Tim for inviting me. This is actually the first time I've ever written directly on moral status. And some of my colleagues in philosophy helped me do this. They were so thrilled that I was writing on it. We've actually, most of us, now called for a ban on direct discussion of moral status. Because the discussion back and forth was extremely repetitive and was getting nowhere. As I said in my paper, that does not mean that the issues that appeal to moral status has been meant to address should be ignored. They're crucial. But as I argue in part of this paper, we are not going to solve them by talking about who or what has moral status. Because the minute you talk about that, you're going to be talking about who doesn't and what doesn't have moral status. And you therefore are going to create lines which I think are antithetical to inclusiveness. Inclusiveness being the value, the fundamental value, that I think ought to drive political theory and political systems. I say that basically out of my own experience, as well as that of other disabled people who have found that opportunities, not merely opportunities, I'll talk about the other problems in a bit, who have found that our opportunities are almost always severely limited for no reason other than we are labeled as disabled. So let me begin simply by saying a tiny bit about moral status. Well, this is in the paper. Moral status is usually invoked in order to attribute considerability or moral considerability to whatever entities are being recorded moral status. Cora Diamond is the person I would tell you to look at if you really want a sophisticated account, and probably the most compelling account of moral status that I know. So if you have moral considerability, what that means is that you matter for a moral judgment. And in the paper I give two different accounts, which are antithetical to each other, about how it is you matter, how people think of this epistemology of moral status. Now, moral considerability has been thought to be the basis for political or legal rights. Those of you who do jurisprudence and foundations of law are familiar with many different theories that attempt to derive law from morality. And that's an interesting but also very controversial account. And most of the MA students we have now who have JDs and decide to be philosophers are coming to us. Not only because there are lots of jobs for PhDs with JDs, but, which is true, but also because they have decided that we cannot base laws on morality. They actually usually have a very unsophisticated account of morality. But those of you who are familiar with US politics know that morality is not likely to be less controversial than the law. Now, usually the way this goes is that if you have the right moral status, whatever that is, that it's thought that you are a right-spirited individual. I have argued in this paper. Some of these arguments are mine, and some of them are other people's, and I've referenced those. But generally, and this is a distinction that I probably make more clearly than some other people, there have been two bases for attributing moral states. One is a psychological basis. There's a claim that there's something about human psychology that is different from anything else in psychology, and it is that distinctive human psychology, whether it's reflection, whether it's the ability to know that you're suffering, whether it is the ability to cognize in a sophisticated or unsophisticated way, that is thought to give you moral status, therefore moral considerability, therefore make you into a right spirit entity. And of course, the minute anybody goes down that line, all of the animal rights people come out, and they all are their favorite animals. And I am sure that all of you have at least one colleague who is less thoughtful than your favorite animal. An argument for which you are using yesterday to good effect. I'm going to come back to this in a bit because so Jeff McMahon is the philosopher now. Peter Singer uses something like this argument, but it's rather hard to know exactly what he's invoking. Jeff McMahon has been using this argument, and he is pulling off it in the second edition of Medicine and Social Justice. And that he is out of the whole lot of argument about moral status. Finally, having been told he cannot debate even one more time. Now, the other basis is biological. This is an argument that says there is something that biological, possibly is in our genes, possibly is our hardwiring, that makes us different from animals. And this at least would get a toe in the water, because undoubtedly, regardless of what your favorite animal is, your DNA is different from that animal's. That takes us absolutely nowhere. And interestingly enough, there are every attempt I know to argue from the difference in between human biology and other animals' biology, to claims that only humans have certain kinds of social practices, fails, because there's always an animal somewhere that doesn't. And you will see, for example, I have to say that I believe as an editor, I really constrained myself, because even today in the new edition that will be coming out of Medicine and Social Justice claims that no animals have caring societies the way that we do. And yet she's probably never looked at public television and looked at all the elephant shows that show how elephants breathe and et cetera, et cetera. So these kinds of arguments will try to draw subline between us and other kinds of entities, I claim, will always fail for two reasons. First of all, they're going to somewhere or other exclude some human beings. And they're also going to be very vulnerable to counterexamples. And if it isn't animals, it'll be computers. So I suggested this is not a basis for moral status, is not a basis for either